The blizzard rolled in like a living beast, swallowing the empty highway 1 inch at a time. Snow hammered the pavement. The wind howled through the trees, and temperatures dropped so fast it felt like the air itself was turning to ice. In the middle of that white fury stood an elderly couple, Thomas and Eleanor, huddled together beside a broken-down shopping cart that held everything they owned. Their coats were thin. Their breath came out in painful gasps. Their fingers were turning blue. Cars sped past, tires skidding on the icy road, but no one stopped. Every set of headlights brought a glimmer of hope until each one disappeared into the storm, leaving Thomas and Eleanor shaking harder than before. Eleanor raised her frail hands toward an approaching truck. "Please help us," she cried, her voice cracking in the wind. The truck slowed for a moment, its brake lights glowing red, then continued on, vanishing into the snow. Thomas leaned heavily on his cane, his legs buckling. "Ellie, we won't make it much longer," he whispered. The storm held louder, burying their footprints. With each passing second, the cold crept deeper into their bones. And just when they thought the blizzard would claim them, a distant bark echoed through the storm. Each breath felt like swallowing glass. Their shoes were soaked through, numbness spreading up their legs. They had nowhere to go. No home waited for them. No warmth awaited them. Just the endless white void closing in. They closed their eyes, accepting the end, until that sound cut through the howling wind again. A bark. Urgent. Close. Deep in the woods, a small cabin stood against the raging storm. Inside, Ethan Walker, former Marine, now living alone by choice, tightened the latch on his windows as the wind roared like a freight train. His German shepherd, Shadow, sat beside the door, ears perked, muscles tense. Ethan frowned. "What is it, boy?" "Storm's bad. Nothing's out there." But Shadow didn't move. His eyes locked on the door, tail straight, body rigid. Then, suddenly, he barked sharp, urgent, before pawing the wood with rising desperation. Ethan grabbed his coat. Shadow never reacted this way unless something was terribly wrong. The moment Ethan opened the door, Shadow bolted into the blizzard. Snow slammed into Ethan's face, stealing his breath, but he pushed forward, following the dark shape, disappearing into the white fog. "Shadow, slow down!" he yelled. But the dog kept running, guided by instinct and something deeper, an emergency only he could sense. Minutes stretched into eternity as Ethan trudged through the storm, boots sinking into drifts up to his knees. The wind stung like needles, but Shadow's barking grew louder, pulling Ethan onward. Finally, Shadow came into view, circling 2 collapsed figures half buried in snow. Ethan's heart lurched. An elderly woman lay unconscious, her lips blue, her hands trembling. A frail man knelt beside her, struggling to keep her upright. Shadow barked again, pressing his nose to the woman's cheek, whining urgently. Ethan dropped to his knees. "My God, you two won't survive another minute out here." The rescue had already begun. He knew only fear. The cabin was safe, but out here, death was waiting. The blizzard screamed like a living beast, swallowing the highway whole. Thomas and Ellie huddled together, frost biting their skin, breaths shallow. Cars sped past, headlights blinding, but none stopped. Hope froze in their veins. Just as darkness closed in, a sharp bark cut through the wind. Someone was finally coming. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. It helps us bring hope to light. Now, let's go back to where the snow began to fall, burying the road beneath a white sheet of silence. The storm was not just weather. It was a wall between life and death waiting to break. Ethan didn't waste a second. He scooped the elderly woman into his arms, shocked by how light she felt, like the storm had already taken half her strength. Her head fell against his shoulder, skin icy to the touch. "Stay with me, ma'am. Please stay with me," he murmured, tightening his grip as the wind roared around them. Shadow nudged the frail old man, pressing his body against him for warmth before guiding him forward with careful steps. Thomas leaned heavily on the dog, breath rattling in shallow bursts. "Ellie, is she alive?" he choked out. "She's breathing." Ethan shouted over the storm, "But we have to move now." The blizzard grew fiercer with every step. Snow drifts rose like walls, forcing Ethan to wade through waist-deep powder while shielding Eleanor's face from the slicing wind. Branches cracked overhead. One snapped and crashed behind them, sending up a plume of white. Thomas flinched, nearly falling, but Shadow braced beneath his legs, steadying him with quiet determination. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. The cabin felt miles away, though it was barely a quarter mile. Ethan's legs burned. His breath came out in sharp clouds. The weight in his arms felt heavier by the second. "Shadow! Find the way!" Ethan yelled. The dog barked once and forged ahead, disappearing momentarily in the swirling white before reappearing like a guide carved from the storm itself. Ethan tightened his grip on Eleanor and pressed forward. They had no choice that if they stopped for even a moment, the blizzard would finish what the world had already started. They had to make it home. Every muscle screamed in protest. The cold tried to lock his joints, but he thought of the wife's pale face. He pushed through the pain, step by agonizing step, knowing that hesitation meant death for them all. Ethan kicked the cabin door open with his shoulder, snow spilling inside as he carried Eleanor across the threshold. Warm air rushed out, fogging his breath. He laid her gently on the couch near the fireplace, while Shadow guided Thomas in, nudging him until he reached a chair. Ethan slammed the door shut, locking out the storm's fury. He wrapped Eleanor in blankets, her skin pale and trembling. Thomas reached out with shaking hands, whispering, "Ellie, please wake up." Ethan brought heated towels, pressing them carefully against her frozen fingers. Shadow lay beside her, radiating warmth like a living blanket. Minutes passed before Eleanor's eyelids fluttered. She gasped weakly, drawing her first full breath in hours. Thomas broke into tears. "Thank God, thank God." Ethan knelt beside them. "How long have you two been out there?" Thomas swallowed hard. Shame filled his voice. "We lost our home last year. Medical bills, everything gone. We've been living out of that cart ever since." Eleanor squeezed his hand. "We didn't want to burden anyone. We kept hoping things would get better." Ethan's jaw clenched. No one deserved to face a storm like this alone. Before he could respond, Shadow suddenly lifted his head. His ears shot forward. A low rumble rolled from his chest. He stood, positioning himself between the couple and the door, tail stiff, eyes locked on something outside. The wind howled. Shadow ignored it. He sensed movement, something close, something circling the cabin. The danger wasn't over. Ethan grabbed his rifle as a thud shook the cabin. Shadow lunged, barking fiercely. Ethan cracked the door. Wolves, starving, driven by the storm. One lunged, teeth flashing. Ethan fired a warning shot. The wolves scattered, but one circled closer. Shadow rammed the wolf mid-charge with fearless precision. The animal retreated into the fog. Ethan braced the door. "They'll come back," he said. Shadow stood guard all night, never sleeping. Morning light broke, turning the world into a glittering landscape. The wolves were gone. Inside, Eleanor sipped warm tea, color returning. Thomas looked at Ethan. "You saved our lives," he whispered. Ethan shook his head. "Shadow saved you." "I just followed him." Shadow rested his head on Thomas's knee. The old man smiled for the first time in months. By afternoon, emergency services arrived. Arrangements were made. Housing, medical care, safety. As they left, Eleanor looked back. "You gave us